You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Monday the 17th of September. Ex-Deputy Lord Mayor for Peterborough in child porn charges. Yet more illegal Afghanis courtesy of a Bulgarian lorry. Greening to investigate the Department for International Development. France is banning anti-US protests by Muslims over film. French police veer away from assassination theory in Alps massacre. Senkaku Islands in dispute between China and Japan. Thought for the day, livid from Hampshire. And finally, have boots, will travel. UK News. An ex-Labour Deputy Lord Mayor and Councillor for Peterborough, John Johnson, has appeared at Peterborough Magistrates Court charged with making 714 indecent images of children. Johnson, who is 62, had allegedly the most perverse collection of images of children on his computer. Prosecutor Giles Beaumont said this charge relates to some extreme level pornography. Some images involve adult males with various animals. Johnson was released on unconditional bail to return to Peterborough Magistrates Court on November the 6th. The magistrate, Michael Flanagan, commented, "I'm going to decline jurisdiction in this instant. This case will be heard before a Crown Court." Johnson, who is an ex-Labour councillor for the North Breton area, declined to answer charges in the court. Johnson was a keen anti-fox hunt campaigner, yet the prosecution explained in court that some of his sordid images were involving animals. John Johnson joins the Labour 25 listed by Parents Against Paedophiles in the UK. He is apparently in good Labour company on this list. A Bulgarian lorry has been stopped by the UK Border Agency and was found to be carrying 5 illegal immigrants. The illegals were hidden in the lorry bound for Milton Keynes, but were discovered by the UKBA at the port of Calais in France. The lorry was carrying a large amount of washing machines and the men hid on top of them. The border agency used carbon dioxide probes to detect the Afghani nationals, who were soon arrested and detained by the police. Justin Greening, who was appointed by Cameron in the reshuffle of the cabinet as International Development Secretary, has launched an investigation in the budget line of that department. The emergency audit was organised last night and will centre on the consultancy firms, one of which is Adam Smith International, which is London-based. This firm promotes the free market in poor countries and has received contracts worth tens of millions of pounds over a 12-month period. The countries that benefit are schools in Pakistan, free market in Nepal and a tax system in Afghanistan. Miss Greening will be receiving a full report by the end of September. A World at 8 reporter commented, "It is similar to Sherry Blair and her legal firm, who make millions from illegal immigrants in this country. Only these boys openly make it from the poorest people of these countries, who for the most part benefit enormously from foreign aid as it is. We really should be looking after our own country and people in this day and age." Euronews. The Interior Minister of France, Manuel Valls, has pushed forward a law to ban any further anti-American protests concerning the film The Innocence of Muslims. The law comes into place after the attack on the US Ambassador Christopher Stevens and the killing of 3 other American officials in a grenade attack in Libya. True to the 11th anniversary of 9/11, anti-US demos have been held across the Muslim world, with the requisite storming of embassies and the burning of flags and the beating of breasts. Muslims in Iran, Turkey, Sudan, Egypt, Yemen, Tunisia, Bangladesh, Indonesia, Malaysia, Kashmir, Pakistan, India, Iraq, Gaza, Morocco, Syria, Kuwait, Nigeria, Kenya, Australia, Britain, United States, France, Belgium and some other countries have been demonstrating. A World 8 writer commented, "They claim that this short film states that Islam is a repressive religion, and of course, by their subsequent behaviour, they are just proving the point the film has made. Of course there was a similar attack on Christianity a few years back involving the film The Life of Brian. And also the film by Mel Gibson on our Saviour Jesus Christ was not well received by many members of the Jewish community. But apparently very sensitive people, these Muslims." The French police seem to be concentrating on the murder of the cyclist who was killed alongside members of the Al-Hili family in Annecy. They seem to think now that the British Iraqi family might not have been the targets. The cyclist, named as Sylvain Molière, who had worked in the nuclear industry, was buried temporarily in a secret ceremony on Sunday. A World at 8 reporter commented, "It seems a bit silly after all this time that they have not got any suspects in France. Someone, whether they killed the cyclist before or after the family, surely would have been seen in the village. I believe the family was assassinated, and the police detouring back to the UK and the cyclist's work is all pie in the sky. Or it could be that the Al-Hilis and Molière were meeting each other." World news. The largest naval exercise in history is being drilled in the Middle East. International warships are carrying out the exercise, some say to show muscle in the region. Meanwhile, the Israelis are pressuring the United States into an intervention with Iran over its nuclear programme, and Ahmadinejad still wants to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. The Iranian government in Tehran has admitted that their elite Revolutionary Guard have been operating in Syria, helping President Assad squash the uprising by those who the West armed to take over the country. Iran has spoken out about the attack on the Muslim world and said Iran has forces in Syria and will go into action if Syria is threatened. A World at 8 writer has stated, "Well, if Iran sticks to Syria, that's fine by me. Let Muslim help Muslim. But if they attack Israel, that is a call to arms. Mainly because, in their words, Israel would cease to exist. And that is not kosher." The United States has intervened in the ongoing dispute in the China Seas over the Senkaku Islands claimed by Japan. The Chinese were outraged when the Japanese government bought the islands from a private Japanese landowner and made them part of Japan. The islands, which are also claimed by Taiwan, have seen 6 Chinese naval vessels enter the exclusion zone around them. The Japanese Coast Guard warned off the Chinese vessels, and the United States claims that the islands, which are rich in fishing waters, should be disputed properly around a table. Today, Japan has shut down its factories and offices in China over the disputed territory of the islands. The Japanese say it's temporary and to stop the worst of anti-Japanese sentiment by the Chinese people in nearly a decade. The new Somali president, Hassan Sheikh Mohammed, and visiting Kenyan foreign minister narrowly missed being assassinated at a hotel in Mogadishu, where they were attending a conference. A Reuters witness said 2 bodies could be seen outside the hotel, one of whom appeared to be a suicide bomber, and there was a large crater in the road. This does not bode well for the stability of a highly unstable country. Thought for the day. Livid from Hampshire. I'm always reminded of my beloved Tony Hancock and his "disgusted from Penge" when I launch into an anti-immigration thingy, but in his memory I am doing just that. To those of my listeners who do not remember or admit to remembering our Tony, he typified the best and the worst of the English middle class. All pride, poverty and pianos. He was, in short, hilarious, with his hangdog face and many nefarious problems, most of which centred around money, or lack of it, and being invisible to the public servants of his time. If he'd been faced with the gradual destruction of his beloved England and the English, it would have broken his heart. So Tony, this is for you, because you would not recognise your England of today. Hell, even I don't, and I'm quite a bit younger. Take London. Well, everybody else has, so why not us? When I worked and lived in the city in which I was born, it was a lovely, lovely place. There were still the slums, but then they were building huge tower blocks, ostensibly for all those people who had lived in the slums below. But now, of course, they all hold varying degrees of ethnic peoples. When you walked along Regent Street, there were the lovely shops, smart people, and the occasional ethnic. The whole street smelled of money and class. Now it smells of curry, drab clothes, and hordes of unwanted and unneeded immigrants and truly awful ethnic shops. For the last 40 years, successive governments in the UK, whether Conservative or Labour, have introduced the guilt and help culture. They have told us that we, the English, are absolutely no good on our own. Various governments have now completed the total eradication of all our own manufacturing bases, from cars to steel. In short, everything we Brits used to be world class at making, and I am including luxury goods here, and have imposed on us their alternative good for the world ethos, which are usually the shoddy goods churned out by China, India and various countries of the third world. So we decimate our own manufacturers and in place of them import crap. It sounds viable to me. We are all getting older, so we'll all be either balmy or well on the way. Our children will not have been educated or raised in the culture of caring for their parents, so we will have to sell what homes we have to pay a bunch of foreign-owned and staffed so-called care homes to take our money and ignore us at the end. And in fact, the average length of stay in one of those homes, whether council or private, is around 2 years before you pop your clogs. Our children, that is British and white, especially the boys, are sadly neglected whilst our young girls are over-sexualised and prey to all forms of sexual grooming that now exist in our cities. Once again, we can usually thank the immigrants for this as well. In our culture today, young white boys either want to be black, Asian or queer. Now, I personally do not give a rat's arse who does what to whom, but I would rather they keep it quiet, not adopt children and generally get on it with their own business. Gay pride marches and such like are a bit in for a dig, but obviously fit in with the image that the establishment want to portray the British as being part of, a multicultural and a multi-sexual society, in short, a general free-for-all. There is no effort on the part of anyone to have a fairly disciplined society. You have to start with the youth of a country, and how can you get to them when the smokescreen of hundreds of other cultures get in the way? ITV showed a classroom in a school in London the other night, and one white face was not to be seen. Do you think China or Japan would have such a variety? No, they would not. It does not bode well for the UK to have a growing amount of immigrant children whilst the white births are non-existent, due to either something in the water, the female feminist culture, prolific abortions in the white population, and social and economic pressures on the English. The Asians especially tell their young girls from an early age that they will get married and have children. The parents provide houses, flats and businesses for them to do it, and they just get on with it. That is what they come to this country to do: be educated, earn and make money and breed. You would think that seeing the encroachment of ethnic peoples in every town and village in the UK would ring the warning bells in good old Jack and Jill, but it doesn't. We're like turkeys voting for Christmas. Food and public services are suffering mainly due to massive immigration, and no one ever says anything about it. Why? Because it's been drummed into the average Brit through the TV and papers to think along those lines, of which every other country in the world thinks but us, is racist. There are at least 3 generations of Brits who are completely dedicated to the want culture, and the future, their future, is forgotten in the latest video game, drink or a job if they're lucky. Amongst the many and awful variations of assorted immigrants, the Muslims of course make their mark. They must be the only people who cannot function in a new country without hordes of mosques, madrasas and Islamic centres on every street corner. In their own countries, and these people do have their own countries, they seem to exist with a mud building with a dome somewhere in the desert, and that's okay. But let them come to Europe and they start building like termites. The rock in Mecca actually predates Muhammad and his political rise, so these people are not used to rushing around building religious edifices. Give them a rug and a general direction on which to grovel, and that should do quite nicely. I'm sick of seeing planning applications for mosques all over this country. I'm sick of seeing Muslims of all shades dragging around hordes of future terrorists and nuisances. I'm sick of seeing vast groups of Nepalese taking over schools and roads in the south. I'm sick of seeing Indian restaurants where there used to be a public house, preferably called the Turk's Head. I'm sick of seeing new halal shops. I'm sick of seeing terrible Asian bazaar type shops where there used to be English shops. I'm sick of seeing Africans plodding around jabbering in their own tongue, and I hate, really hate, having all of them in shops where they cannot speak English and do not care less. In fact, I hate having them here at all. I also hate the fact that our NHS, which used to be a signal to the rest of the world that we care, is now barely functioning because the establishment for years have allowed a huge influx of immigrants into it whilst discouraging our own people. And now we have a third world service mainly for the benefit of our third world parasites. Soon they will stop treating the white elderly or the fat or the smokers, but they will treat some unsodding grandmother from Bangladesh who happens to end up here. If any of our governments have actually stopped immigration 30 years ago, there would be no need for a nationalist party or parties to the right. We would not have the problems we have today. The problems our children are ignoring are the problems that have been created intentionally to weaken this country, and it has succeeded. We should become a non-immigration country immediately to save anything and start voluntary repatriation as soon as possible. All of the countries we give foreign aid to are non-immigrant countries. Why are they developing a free market in Nepal when we have all the buggers over here? Why aren't all these people back in their own countries helping their own? Most of them go back and forth to second homes in the countries that apparently they had to flee, so I do not see the problem. I do not want to see England become a third-rate housing estate for immigrants, and I do not care if they're first or second generation. I do not want to see our land become a factory halal farm for Muslims and their progeny. I want to see church spires, not mosque towers. I want to see more white faces of my tribe on the streets and in the shops. I want this country to wake up and stop funding countries overseas. Both Africa and India wanted rid of the British, but when they did, they followed us home or start bleating about starving. Both India's caste system and Africa's tribalism allows large proportions of their populations to starve, and for the remainder who do not, to prosper and not care. So why should we? Angry from Hampshire does care. I want our government to start caring about this country and stop regulating and policing our people. I want immigration stopped now. I want the Brits to wake up. Life is not lived through a computer game or the soaps on the TV. We need to develop a backbone before it is too late. For too long has the Brits' answer been to buy some beer, get a DVD and shut the front door. One day that front door may be opened by someone you do not want in your home, and by then it'll be too late. And finally, cat owner Ethel Mays decided to go on holiday to Disney World. She packed her suitcase and belongings for the trip to the Florida attraction. But Bob the pussycat didn't want his owner to have all the fun without him. In a bizarre twist, somehow Bob got himself into Ethel's suitcase and got through the scanner at Port Columbus Airport and was put on the flight to Orlando. When Ethel opened her suitcase, there was Bob, shaken but happy to see her. But he was not allowed into Disney World to see his big cousin, the Lion King. Oh dear. You have been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynne Mozar, and I wish you all a very good night. French police veer away from assassination theory in Alps massacre. Senkaku Islands in dispute between China and Japan. Thought for the day, livid from Hampshire. And finally, have boots, will travel. UK News. An ex-Labour Deputy Lord Mayor and Councillor for Peterborough, John Johnson, has appeared at Peterborough Magistrates Court charged with making 714 indecent images of children. Johnson, who is 62, had allegedly the most perverse collection of images of children on his computer. Prosecutor Giles Beaumont said this charge relates to some extreme level pornography. Some images involve adult males with various animals. Johnson was released on unconditional bail to return to Peterborough Magistrates Court on November the 6th. The magistrate, Michael Flanagan, commented, "I'm going to decline jurisdiction in this instance. This case will be heard before a Crown Court." Johnson, who is an ex-Labour councillor for the North Breton area, declined to answer charges in the court. Johnson was in the news today, Monday the 17th of September. Ex-Deputy Lord Mayor for Peterborough in child porn charges. Yet more illegal Afghanis courtesy of a Bulgarian lorry. Greening to investigate the Department for International Development. France is banning anti-US protests by Muslims over film.
You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynne Mozar. The World at 8, the #1 in nationalist news.
Highlights